recommend Meetup to a lot of my friends that are looking for different things. Wine tasting, movies, book club, meet a lot of new people, a lot of new friends, and it will make you more social.
What is a chess dynasty? Unceasing dominance, move after move, again and again and again.
We have a resignation, we have history.
He is the 5-time FIDE World Chess Champion.
But a chess dynasty can also be cruel. It forces most to defer their dreams until next time. If there is a next time.
It's losing.
Oh my God, did he just blow?
Yeah, he did.
I'm blown away. The game is over.
As the chess world turns to Kazakhstan, the Magnus Carlsen dynasty is set to close. The FIDE World Championship is finally up for grabs. For two chess superstars lying in wait, until next time is now. Jan Nepomniachtchi has methodically done what he needed to do to get another shot at the title. The pressure to seize the moment this time rests heavily upon him.
Jan Nepomniachtchi saves the game with the black pieces, which means that he is one game closer to the World Championship title.
Ding Liren knows firsthand what the end of this dynasty means. An unexpected chance to make history. Can China's best turn his good fortune into eternal fame?
The rook pawn is going to be a draw, and Ding there with a smile gives it up. He knows there's no trying in this one. A hard-fought battle.
The legacy of this championship spans across centuries. It reads from the names of chess giants. For the first time in a decade, a new name will raise the trophy and be etched into chess history. It's the 2023 FIDE World Championship. Whose name will next be called champion?
Chess fever is on in Astana as the city hosts the ultimate battle to crown the king of classical chess. It's been a long journey for the two challengers to the halls of the St. Regis Hotel. And we are live inside the playing arena as we wait for Jan Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren to arrive. It's now the final stretch of the FIDE World Championship match. Welcome everyone, I'm International Master Tanya Sachdev. Alongside me, my co-commentators, Grandmaster Robert Hess and Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana. 4 games remain. Jan Nepomniachtchi leads with 1 point. Ding Liren has to strike back to equalize. Right off the bat, Fabi, what's the one thing you're expecting from Ding today?
I don't know if it's so much expecting, but I think that he is in a position now when we're getting close to the end of the match when maybe it's time to take some extra risks. And we've seen these players both take risks during this match. But in the last few games, they've played rather quietly, steadily. But Ding is still down a point, and he doesn't want to let it get to that, final few games when he's in a must-win situation. I think he should try to take the chance now to get some chances.
As we get closer to the finish line in a 14-game match, each match becomes that much heavier. The pressure increases. The margin for error at this point for Ding Liren is 0. He needs to win a game. Jan Nepomniachtchi looking good. With every passing game, he gets closer to becoming world champion. Robert, what will be Jan's approach today?
Well, you say the margin for error for Ding Liren is nearly 0. The number of errors yesterday was pretty much 0. And for Jan Nepomniachtchi, I think it's going to be more of the same. Why should he take any risk? Why does he need to do anything different? He should play his solid, steady approach. Another draw will not be a bad result for him, especially because there's a rest day tomorrow, and then he can prepare to have the black pieces in the 12th round.
A draw in this match would mean that Jan just goes steps closer to that World Championship title, while for Ding it would mean one game less to strike back. So much at stake. The start of the World Championship match, this first half, was a fist fight with 5 decisive games starting from game 2. And then we saw 4 back-to-back victories with the white pieces. But going into the second half, we see the players treading more cautiously. They are taking less risks and playing with incredibly high accuracy. As we saw, starting from game 8, it was a draw, 3 back-to-back draws. In game 10, once again, with the white pieces, we saw Ding Liren push, exert pressure, but Jan had a principled approach to defense. And though Ding tried, Fabi, it was never close to being enough.
Yeah, yesterday we saw a nearly perfect, one could even say perfect game of chess. But at the moment, Ding doesn't want perfect games of chess. He wants a mess. He wants some blood. As Tal said, you want to take your opponent into a deep, dark forest. And that's what Ding needs at the moment. He really needs to get back into the equality of the match. And then, we'll see in the final few games. But I think it would be very difficult for him if we're going to the final game of the match and he needs to win. White pieces or not, you don't have amazing chances of winning a single game against a player as strong and as well prepared as Jan Nepomniachtchi. So every game is a chance. I think he should be trying to create complications and a way for his opponent to make mistakes.
Yeah, I think for Ding, he needs to make the most of his chances, but he's just not going to get them. I'm sorry to say it. I know chat's going to hate me, but I expect a D word. A draw today. I think that's what is likely because Jan Nepomniachtchi, he wants to coast through to the finish line. He sees it. It's within his sight. So why should he take any risk? He has the white pieces. If he can liquidate, if he can make a draw, I think he's going to do that.
Big questions. How much will Jan push with white? Ding Liren, will he be under pressure one more time with the black pieces? And will he be able to hold fort? It was a confident hold in game 10 by Jan Nepomniachtchi. And this is what Ding had to say about the outcome of the game.
Today I drew another white game. So it means there are only 4 games left. I need to at least score 1 win to level the score. It's become quite normal, like there are 3 draws in the 3 rounds. But okay, the tournament is still not finished yet. So okay, we still have 4 games left. I wouldn't say how much confidence am I now. I didn't consider that.
Four games left, 2 with the white pieces for Ding Liren. Confidence will be a big factor in this one. And as we can see, our Chesscom stats team has given these odds based on the outcome, the result of today's game 11. It's going to be a big, exciting day of chess. If Jan Nepomniachtchi with the white pieces wins, essentially, it won't just be game over, it will be match over. It's nearly impossible. Ding Liren will need the biggest of miracles to come back from a 2-point deficit. A 98% favorite for Jan there, with a draw still more than an 80% favorite. And if Ding strikes back with the black pieces, our stats team actually inches more towards Ding with a 47% to Jan Nepomniachtchi. Looking at these stats, Robert, is it fair to say that for Ding, it's more important to keep things under control, to not take extra risk than to try for a win today with black.
Yeah, for Ding Liren, he gets 2 whites in the remaining 3 games after today. We've seen him create chances with the white pieces, not yesterday, but in game 8. That result may have been a draw, but he was winning. So as you said, confidence will be important for him. I think he should confidently try to neutralize the opening advantage today, and then he could take it from there.
Easier said than done, Robert, with Jan Nepomniachtchi starting with the white pieces. It is all going to come down to what is Jan's approach today. Will he be the one who'll try to close off the match today, maximize his chances, try to create chaos on the board? But the drawback of that strategy would be that Ding perhaps could get his moments in the game and strike back. Well, it's been a fascinating World Championship with so many decisive games. With the black pieces, we've seen only one win so far, and it was back in game 2 with Jan Nepomniachtchi drawing first blood in the match with a fantastic win with black. Apart from that, we've often seen in the match the player playing black has struggled to neutralize out of the opening. Now, Jan hasn't lost a single game in this match with black. Ding, meanwhile, not just in this match, with the black pieces, Ding has not yet defeated Jan Nepomniachtchi in this World Championship match, as well as any of the classical games that they've played against each other. Robert, is that going to have a psychological effect on Ding going into today's game?
Yeah, Ding has not beaten Jan Nepomniachtchi with the black pieces. I don't think he is going to be aiming for that today. If an opportunity arises, he will try to make the most of it. But you can see Jan Nepomniachtchi there. Same salmon-colored shirt, same strong mental fortitude, same fantastic chess player as we've seen throughout this World Championship. So for Ding, he knows his opponent at this point, and he knows that he can't just drum up a win out of nowhere. He would have to take some serious risk, and I just don't think Ding needs to do that at this late stage. He still has 2 white games remaining. I don't think now is the time to let things go crazy.
Just 4 games remaining to getting our 17th chess world champion. Fabi, are you surprised to see Jan return with a pink shirt or not as much?
Well, I'm not his stylist, but if I were, I would tell him, maybe to try out a different color. They say variety is a spice of life. So let's see some different colors for these last few games. But I think that these last few games will be very interesting. As you said, Jan has never lost to Ding with the white pieces. And that's very relevant. But I still think that Ding should try to take his chances. Just because things haven't happened in the past doesn't mean that they can't happen today or potentially in the remaining black game that Ding will have. And I want to push back a little bit on what Robert said, because even though we have seen Ding create a lot of chances with the white pieces, I feel like it is possible he has exhausted his repertoire of ideas with white. And that might be why we saw the last game he wasn't fully perfectly prepared for this bishop c5 move that Jan came out with. And I feel like he's trying to probe a little bit in various directions, trying to find some sort of weaknesses in Jan's opening repertoire, but he might have already used his main ideas in the earlier stages in this match.
Yeah. Very interesting, because even at the press conference, Ding actually confessed to being out of his preparation by move 9 with that move bishop c5 that you mentioned by Jan. We've seen Ding come up with these very combative, energetic opening surprises, but then with a one slight deviation by Jan, which perhaps is not the top move, it feels as if Ding tends to go into a think and finds himself out of his familiar preparation. Robert, has that surprised you a little bit, the fact that Ding is the one who is playing these amazing variations and these different openings, but very quickly is also the one who goes into a think tank?
Well, to push back against Fabiano's pushback here, we're good friends. We can argue sometimes. I think that Ding said it himself, that he was interested in risk minimization, because at the critical moment when he took that pawn on d6 yesterday and traded queens, he could have dropped his bishop back. That's actually what Fabiano was recommending. That would have provided him more winning chances. He seemed a bit nervous. He just wanted to get down to that end game where he couldn't possibly lose. Nothing could go wrong there. So I feel, to answer your question directly, Tanya, it has been a bit surprising. But I think that Ding Liren has shown his emotions. I think that he has been quite upfront with everybody watching that he is nervous, that things aren't going exactly his way, but he still is within the territory where he can win this match. He's only 1 point behind. And as we see the players getting seated there in Kazakhstan, I mean, Ding Liren, he knows what he needs to do today, and that is not lose.
I'm going to push back on both of you pushing back and say that definitely for a World Championship preparation, Ding's prep today has to not lack that depth. He cannot afford to burn the clock early on. Yan playing with the white pieces, Ding has to be sure that he has those critical minutes, reaching time control, reaching move 40. It is something that Yan can play on by not taking too much risk perhaps in the opening stages, but making sure that he poses the big question when the clock runs low. We see both players seated. I'm expecting the jackets to come off, meticulously be placed on the chairs. First moves are about to happen. And of course, that begs the question to be asked. 1e4 by Yan, is that a mutual vote?
I'm going to go with yes. I think e4. I don't think it's time to experiment for Yan because as you guys both pointed out, he's in the lead and there's no reason to take unnecessary risk. You're in the lead. Of course, you're playing with the white pieces, and I think Jan will still have some ambition, of course, in this game, but he's not going to want to put himself in a position where he's potentially losing the game. That would be a complete disaster and put Ding not only back in the match, but arguably as a favorite, especially in the psychological sense, because winning with the black pieces in such a crucial game, that would be so huge psychologically and in the match score. So I think e4, and you know what I hope to see? I don't know if I expect it, but I hope to see a Sicilian Najdorf.
You actually said that yesterday, Fabi, and Robert, you were quite amused with that prediction at the close of the show after game 10. And I have to ask you, what are the chances of us actually seeing a Najdorf today, Robert?
This is one where I trust Fabi, and I think that it would be excellent to see a Najdorf. And I just want to say I agree completely with what Fabi's been saying. And I'm looking at this game, I'm looking at the opening stage. Jan has had advantages with the white pieces. Let's not forget that 2 games ago in game 9, Jan actually had an advantage, and he was disappointed with that draw. So he is an ambitious player. If the situation occurs where he can play for an edge, he will do just that. But he wants to minimize his own risk. The players, I mean, they're seated, they're ready. I think that Ding Liren, he's looking at this board intently, and I think we should all intently wait for his first move, because if it's c5, it's a Sicilian. Fabi, you're going to be a proud commentator and colleague of Ding Liren.
Oh, I will be super proud. But, I don't know what I would do if I was in his position. It's easy to say, play the Sicilian, go all out, try to take advantage of perhaps Jan's uncertainty in terms of, should I play for a win? Should I play it solidly? That is a sort of vulnerable psychological state where you can try to, and here we see the first move, e4, played. Not a surprise, but will Jan, because he's not obligated to play that first move, he's taking it back. Will he play it, or will he choose something else?
I think it's just taken back to make it himself. And we see that Ding get up, take off the jacket. He's going to sit right back, and we're going to have handshakes at the start of the game. Wow, 1e4 is what we're expecting. It's going to be a big shocker if Jan actually decides to play something else, simply because he's been getting such great positions out of the opening. Ding's the one who's been challenged to neutralize White's advantage. And as the match etches towards that finish line, it becomes that much more difficult. Psychologically, the pressure increases to get out of the opening without too much trouble. Ding so far hasn't been that successful in this one. Guys, 1e6, the French, I don't believe that's going to happen. The clocks have started. 1e4, that call was an easy one to make. But with Ding Liren, what will he start with? Will he reach out for c5? No, he goes with e5, the king's pawn opening. Fabi, you look disappointed.
A little bit. Okay, are we going to see a Berlin again? Yeah, I feel like it's going in that direction because it was a very successful opening for Ding in the last game where he played with the black pieces. Going back to the anti-martial, he's hesitating here a bit, but I think he'll probably go for the Berlin.
I don't think so, Fabi. I think the fact that he's thinking right now, I'm going to say it's not going to be a Berlin. And we have a move. It's the Spanish.
You called it. It will be probably an anti-martial, unless will Ding go for an Archangelisk? B5, Bishop C5? I mean, he's shown that he's surprising him in every game. He's playing a different opening every game. But he reverts to his usual repertoire, the martial.
Robert, at this stage, I would love to see a martial happen. Do you think Yan will allow that, or will he go for an anti-martial?
I think he'll go for an anti-martial. I mean, there's no reason why he should go into the treacherous territory that is the martial used in so many world championships past. And I think that for Yan, he's just trying to think, what does Ding Liren want from me? And there it is. He plays D3. We're starting with these closed variations. It's going to be a slower build-up. And I think a good choice by both of these players, because for Ding, he plays his normal repertoire. It works very well for him. A couple days ago, from the opening stage, he made that rook b8, a bit of a timid move. But if he doesn't show hesitation, there's no reason why he should fear the opening stage, as he's proving with the black pieces he can do quite well.
And this was how Yan beat Ding in the 2020 candidates. A very crucial game, which was instrumental, you could say, in Yan winning the 2020 candidates and qualifying for his first World Championship match in 2021. And so the game will probably continue A3 here. There is also A4, there's C3. But yeah, A3. C3 was what we saw earlier in the match. But A3 is the main move, and now the question is, will Ding play knight A5, C5 immediately, or will he castle knight C3 and then likely knight A5? I think he'll go for the very modern approach, knight A5, bishop A2, C5. White's idea in these positions is to develop the knight to C3, and Black's idea is usually to get that knight from C6 to a better square, to open up the path of the C-pawn to gain a bit more space in the center. Although so the game in the 2020 candidates continued castle, knight C3, knight A5, bishop A2, bishop to E6, and here B4. And bishop takes A2, rook A2, knight C6, bishop G5, knight to D7. Or no, not knight to D7. Sorry, I think it was actually
You're allowed
queen to D7. Yes, queen to D7. Yeah.
I was going to say you're allowed to forget, Fabi. It's okay, but apparently your memory kicked right back in there.
I saw this game recently when reviewing the recent games between, or the past games between Yan and Ding, the past decisive games, and this was obviously a very important one. And White took on F6, played knight D5, and Black surprisingly allowed the knight takes F6. This was obviously preparation by both players, but Yan came better prepared and won a very, very interesting game. And Ding is hesitating because Black has a really major choice here. Does he want to castle or knight A5 first? And the modern approach is to not castle, is to play knight A5 immediately. And after bishop A2, C5, actually Ding played this against me in 2016. Knight C3, bishop to E6, and I played knight to H4. And also some sort of modern theory. At the time it was considered dubious for Black, but these days it's considered completely fine for Black. Very often Black is trying to play C4 to completely shut off that bishop on A2. And White's idea is to play knight F5. For example, if castle here, knight to F5, I think this is like big theory, bishop F5, E5, D5. Otherwise, White will gain the light squares, bishop to G5, attacking, indirectly attacking that pawn D5, and then C4, and some sort of very unclear theory, and I don't remember exactly the details, but I think rook to E1 here, or queen to E1 is some sort of theory. It's considered a good line for Black, but it's very confusing because tactically speaking, it's very close to being bad for Black. For example, I think this queen to E1 move is at this moment, and it's also preparing rook to D1, as well as attacking E5 and eyeing the knight on A5, so it's a very multi-purpose move. We could see something like this. It's not out of the question at all. But I actually suspect that Yan will have some new idea in this line, because, as we know, Ding has been a lifelong martial player. So for Yan, this was like a main point of interest before the match. So of course he would come to this opening armed with ideas in all sorts of variations. That's to be expected. We already saw he had two very serious ideas earlier in this match against Andy Marshall, so I suspect we'll see a third very serious idea.
And I just want to continue this line a couple more moves, because if black plays h6, just to illustrate Fabi's point, then knight takes d5 is available. The queen on d8 is overloaded, needed to defend the knight here, because the queen takes knight in return, white steals a pawn. So a very instructive line, a very deep variation. And Fabi, what we're seeing on the board right now, this may be one of the variations, not that end line, because that would be a blunder, but we see c5 and knight c3. So following the path that you just laid out for us.
Yeah, I think bishop to e6 is the move here. And after bishop to e6, will he play knight h4, or there's some positional lines involving bishop to g5, but knight h4 is the most critical move. But yeah, Jan is going for, it's a similar approach to when we saw that earlier game where he played an early c3 instead of a3. And then he tried to chop off the knight on f6, and indeed he did, with the idea of exploiting the d5 square. So it seems like Jan just likes these positions in principle. It's actually so similar to that game from a positional strategic point of view. I think black is going to, make some move which allows bishop takes f6. For example, short castle here should be quite a normal move. And then we see the trade-off between the bishop pair and the light square outpost on the d5 square.
Yeah, one of the big drawbacks of putting your pawns 2 squares apart is a square in between is your opponent's for the taking. That's why the bishop came to g5 to take this knight on f6 and then plop a pony on d5. And very instructive is that, typically speaking, you don't want to take this bishop on e6. That does double black's pawns. And for those of you who are new to chess, you've heard that double pawns are bad because they can't protect each other. But here, a pawn on e6 would actually cover some very important squares. It's not just the d5 square. Let's not forget Fabi's big idea of knight h4 to f5. That's not going to happen if there's a pawn sitting on e6. Not to mention there's also an open f-file for the rook once the king castles. So just, you're not taking on e6. That's not the point of this variation. It is to put that knight on d5.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting strategic battle. There aren't many concrete lines here. I don't think that black should try to avoid. Sometimes you play knight to d7 to avoid the trade of bishop for knight, to keep that knight, which is a better defender of the light squares, obviously, than dark square bishop, which can never, ever control those light squares. But here it looks like black, having not castled, probably should take the opportunity to castle before before allowing the position to become concrete. And yeah, then white will probably at some point take on f6. I think that will happen. I mean, there's no other idea behind bishop g5 besides taking that. And then we have a position which is similar to, I forget which game was it, as you can help me out here, where we saw this structure and this was a game.
Ooh. I'm trying to remember now myself, because they all sort of merge together.
I think game 5 is game 5 correct, because Ding lost the second, drew the third, won the fourth, and lost the fifth. So it could have been game 5.
It sounds right. Where there eventually was the open e-file, the knight versus the bishop, and that's exactly what we're talking about, right? You take this knight on f6, you leave black with a questionable dark square bishop. So I believe it was game 5. Of course, we can verify that pretty easily.
But in that game, the A file was opened up, which, generally speaking, I would consider to be a bit of an advantage for white compared to having it closed here. Because I think if white ever plays A4 in this sort of position, black will probably play B4 at this point, just because it's such a space-gaining sort of, gains so much space on the queen side, and keeps the A file closed. The knight on A5, it's actually quite a decent piece if A4, B4 happens. So knight D5 immediately we could see here a number of ideas for black. I mean, knight c6 is the most obvious move because you kind of avoid b4 stuff. You get your knight back into the center a little bit. And long-term plans like g6 to drop the bishop back to g7 where it can't be captured. And, I think in that earlier game we saw the fight between white trying to get h4, h5, and black wasn't quite in time to play h5 himself to prevent that expansion. So g6 immediately makes a lot of sense, but knight c6 or g6 might not have changed a whole lot.
Yeah.
Here.
Well, you've been talking about an expansion on the queen side, right? And you mentioned the move knight c6, which kind of does fight against ideas of b4 because it allows the a pawn to advance after that. But then this move g6, just mixing up the move order, it does give Yan the opportunity to go immediately with the move b4. That is very committal. The other plans in these positions, Fabi, have always been to push the c pawn first. So you go c3 and then you try and get b4 in. You just delay it, keep it a bit flexible, either b4 or a4. It gives you the time to decide that. Are you expecting Yan? I see him. He's also thinking about this. He was perhaps expecting the knight retreat before this pawn advance on the king side. But of course, as always, Yan plays quickly. He plays fast. A non-committal move, queen d2, with a big direct threat. Watch out for that knight on a5, the queen on d8. You pointed it out in another position, Robert. It is overloaded currently, defending that bishop on f6, defending that knight on a5. So knight f6 is a big threat. Looks like it's time to come back with that knight. Knight c6 coming up.
I think so. And I think the point of this move is in case black plays bishop g7 at some moment, white may consider the move knight to g5. I think probably knight c6 instead of bishop g7 looks a bit safer for black. But in many variations, that will certainly come to mind as an option. And after knight c6, what's his idea? It could be to play a4. Because you mentioned that c3 b4 idea, but with the queen on d2, I don't see that as preparing c3 b4 so much. Feels like maybe a4 is the plan. Because now with b4, is there some sort of like a5 stuff? I don't know. Because knight takes a5 loses a piece, knight f6 followed by bishop takes e6. Little tactic there. And the idea of a5 from a like strategic sense is to make the a6 pawn a bit of a long-term weakness. But then there's bishop g7. I don't know if this makes any sense for white. White can play knight to b6 here, but it might be a bit of a senseless pawn advance to a5.
Yeah, because the a5 pawn might just be captured at some point in the near future. And the bar is going up and down a little bit, so it's still relative equality, but it just feels like that pawn may not be too long for this board in some
I was just
lines.
hoping like bishop to c4 here would maybe encourage black to take on c4. And basically, I want to trade those bishops because I want to leave a pure bad bishop position, right? The bishop on g7 versus a lone knight would be the ideal goal. But, one player I look to as like trying to combat this sort of bad bishop narrative is Magnus, because at some point he was playing the Sveshnikov, and he was playing a very specific line against the Rosalimo, which is white's main way of combating or trying to avoid Sveshnikov. And he was playing very specifically with a very bad bishop on g7, with pawns on c5 and e5, and then white would play h4, h5, and he would even play h6 and g5. So he put all his pawns on dark squares with that bishop on g7, and you would think, what an awful piece. How could a strong player ever want to go for that sort of position? But it turns out that the bishop is a very good defender of the dark squares, and if the position ever opens up, the bishop starts to like terrorize all the dark squares. So it actually discourages the opening up of the position, which means that white doesn't have as much strategic potential. For example, in this position, if white ever goes for f4 ideas, the bishop suddenly becomes very powerful. So this bishop, bad though it may be, kind of discourages white from opening the center with c3, d4, with f4, and various other typical ideas in similar positions.
And to chat, who's saying that Ding will try to push for a win today, that would be the dream, but given the match situation and playing with black, here's a reminder of a fun fact that Ding has actually never won a game with the black pieces against Yan. Yan has never lost with white against Ding. And second, as we were mentioning in the open as well, that the feeling is that for today's game, it's more important for Ding to hold, to keep things under control, than to push extra hard for a win. With the black pieces, when you're trying to win, you need to take risks. You need to create chances for both sides. The forest